Another thing I find is that senior leadership teams, more often than not, are not teams. I think this is, to me, one of the biggest things you note, and it's for the reasons you talk about. They don't really, first and foremost, I'm the CFO, or I'm the division director, or I'm the sales director. That's my job. Anything else is gravy. I worked once with a leader who basically got all of his folks together. His point to his leadership team was, you all have deputies. Their job is to run the division. Your job is to manage and lead this organization as a whole. What do you think are some of the values that you don't see being modeled? We talk a lot about X and we don't see.
Team players.
Team players. That's a big one. Many people have teamwork in their value statements, and you look at the leadership team, and as we said earlier, they're not really a team, and I want you to play with your team well, but look at me up here. We don't talk to each other, except on very rare occasions. Last month, I was working with a leadership team that had not met together in 1 year. They had not met together. This is a major billion-dollar organization. I was in an off-site meeting them because they were in trouble. Why did they get together? Because they were in trouble. Someone was said, we're not doing what we need to do, so let's all get together. They had not met for 1 year. That is not as outrageous as it sounds. It's always easy to blow off that leadership team meeting, isn't it? Because we got the proposal to do, or the big client meeting. Those are the meetings that take a hit. I can't tell you how many companies I work with where, yep, their monthly meetings scheduled, and you ask them, how many did you have over the past year? 4, 5, maybe at the most. Sort of half of what we had planned to do. Has to model the role. At the end of the program, the leader said, I'm going to do an off-site, and Chuck, I'd like you to come and give a talk on how we can give developmental feedback to people as we walk from one meeting to another in our campus. It was a campus. They had several buildings. I think I failed with that particular leader. This was the person at the top. Can you teach us how to give developmental feedback in walking from meeting A to meeting B? That might be 5 minutes at the most.
Take longer walk.
And you might be able to just circle the building once.
Speed coaching.
Speed coaching. I think you're onto something. Yeah, speed coaching.
Well, there is such a thing as the coachable moments.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. But schedule it into the meeting between the walk between the meetings. I might or might not have a coachable moment. Yes, ma'am. Probably one of the most successful interventions I've ever had was working with a company who came to me and said, Chuck, we want to double revenue in the next 3 years. And the president had come to the realization that the only way I'm going to do this is to change the leadership culture of my organization. This was like the dream job. Not often do you get asked, you get asked a much more microscopic, help me fix this, do that. But this was, broadly speaking, I know if I'm going to make it to the next level in my organization, I have to really deal with the leadership culture. How do I do that? Was his question. And he did we pretty much ended up doing just what Betty suggested. He really started with a conversation around what are the roles that I expect of you besides managing your division. That's a given. And that is what their meetings had been about. Their senior leadership team meetings were, Yvette talks about her division, Tammy talks about her division, Chris talks about sales, and that's the senior leadership. And that has to be done. But what this guy said is that's not enough. We have outlined these other roles. Building talent was one of them. Setting direction and strategy was another one. And they basically said every meeting we have will deal with one of these core strategic issues that we have identified. And every month, religiously, they tackled the business, and then they shifted into, let's tackle some of these strategic issues. And they actually went to the point of allocating time. And here's another big difference about senior leadership teams. I find very rarely that senior executives get feedback from their bosses. Now, I know that we all don't not all of us are great at the lower levels of giving feedback, but I will wager that at lower levels of the organization, there's a lot more happening in the feedback world than there is at the top. I usually hear things like, I got my evaluation on an email that I had written to sign. So there's another huge difference with senior. They don't get a lot of feedback. One presumption from the senior manager is, these are all great people, they don't need development, I mean, they wouldn't be here, I chose them. I don't have to give them a lot of feedback. So I think, obviously, if I'm designing a program to help senior leaders, I start with, obviously, what's important to grow with the business imperatives. That organization, I said, they need to get to the next level. That's what needs to drive us when we build leadership development programs. What are the strategic imperatives? I think everybody knows that. But what we don't tend to do is, so what are the roles of senior leaders besides just making the numbers? And then from that, after you've answered those questions, and those are not easy questions, and those are questions that leadership teams need to grapple with. Those are not questions that HR and learning and development need to tell them. They need to come up with that. They need to say, what roles do we need to play? What is our reason for being here, as Emma said, so that we meet the strategic objectives of the organization? So I'm going to shift our conversation to the last two questions under the nature of the senior leadership team. Because here's where I think you make your money. Either developing as a senior leader, or if you're in the role of developing a senior leader. It's those last two questions. What are their fears, and what are their dilemmas? And I often put the word paradox. I think somebody used the word paradox earlier. A leader has paradoxes. What's the difference? A dilemma is, I've got two choices. Neither one of them are good. It's the Solomon's decision. The paradox is, this sounds on its face as something we wouldn't normally do, but it needs to be done. That's a paradox. And then there's competing values. And these are the things, I would argue that the primary job of leaders is to deal with paradoxes, dilemmas, and competing values. If it's not one of those three things, it's a management issue. That's what you need to spend your time on. That's what I teach. People, as leaders, need to be dealing with paradoxes, dilemmas, and competing values. So that's what a leader ought to be seeking out. What are the competing values in our organization? An example related to performance management. I was working with a senior executive, the president and a CEO of a company. We were talking about the performance review. And on the performance review was that classic, grow the business by X% and build a culture, a high-performance culture so that people succeed. Two very important values, grow the business, build a culture. The president's primary value was grow the business. The CEO's primary value was build a high-performance culture. And when the president said to him, I can do one, but not the other, the CEO had a tough choice to make, right? What's wrong with that picture? I can do one, but not the other.
You can't do that without the other.
Here's the president of a major organization, and that's what he was saying. That's one of those competing values that you need to tease out in organizations.